What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. Happy new comic book day. This is Brandon from Comics Kings, and welcome everybody back to Creators Corner. This is honestly the best show, most fun show that I've had because we get to connect you guys with your favorite creators. And I'm going to bring out one of my favorite creators. We got Si Spurrier with us today. How you doing? Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. It's a really tough act to follow. That intro, it's all very dramatic. I feel like I should be producing a glowing sword from a stone or sticking on a knight's helmet or something.
I feel like I should be screaming like King Joffrey, but before he got poisoned,
Yeah. What is it? Purple poisonous fruit or something he eats.
Spoilers. Yeah, whatever. Who was it? I've watched it twice, but I have not gone back. I haven't read any of the books, and I have them all sitting there. It's just with a stack of comics sitting too. So I'm like, what do I get to first? And that's
you see the trailer for the new, this is completely off tangent before we even begun. You saw the trailer for the new Lord of the Rings show.
I did. I'm excited. I'm going to go back and re-binge everything. It's weird because when I started reading The Hobbit, I was on an airplane. I think we were going to like Montana or something. We were going to go skiing. And I couldn't do it because it was on an iPad. But I'm like a huge Harry Potter fan, as you can tell. So I was like, I need to go back and actually buy the books and read them because I can't read like narratives on like an iPad or anything.
It's done. So like we were talking about this before the show started. I've got a couple of kids. I'm itching for the day my son is old enough that we can sit down and read The Hobbit together. I think that's quite a formative moment for a parent and their child. So
yeah, that was the way my mother was with Harry Potter.
Oh, excellent. These things mean so much more when you've shared them with a parent.
Right. It's like a great bonding moment because then like with the anniversary, right, that just came out, we just got to like relive years of connections and loves for like a bunch of characters. And it was like we just relived easily like 2 years of my life, of my early childhood.
I don't know what we're gonna, this is again more tangenting, we should get onto track in a moment. I don't know what we're gonna do about Harry Potter because I love it. I love all the books, I love the characters, but now that J.K. Rowling has become a slightly problematic character in certain elements of the social sphere, I'm not sure. I don't know. I have to make that decision whether I can separate the art from the artist for my kids on their behalf.
I can in most parts. It's really interesting because like even in comic books, right? Some creators that are really great. I'm not going to mention any names, but Astonishing Xmen. Is a great story. So can we separate that from the person who wrote it? Or the same person who did a great Moon Knight run that everyone's going to go back and read now? Can we separate that?
Tough. I don't have the answer. I think you just have to...
I think it's really subjective, but...
Yeah, you have to vote with your conscience, don't you?
Right.
But
for Harry Potter, I would say, if you want your kid to fall in love with Emma Watson, I would definitely do
that. Fair enough.
But I do want to thank you again for coming on. For everybody who's new to Si's work, he has a great image book coming out next week called Step by Bloody Step. I've already read it. It's great. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Legion of X coming up, I believe in March. I believe it's coming out in March.
March or April, I forget. You will be far better informed than I because I have no functioning capacity for time. So
with all the X-Men books, I kind of forget too when they're coming out. Like,
there's a lot.
Great. There's a whole lot. And then Black Knight was recently concluded, but it seems like we have more in store for us. So let's get the ball rolling with that. Talk about your experience with Black Knight, character that nobody likes, which we even saw in the first few pages when he went to go with the Avengers, team up with the Avengers. Like, who the hell is this guy? We don't really care. So how about you speak on that a little bit for us today?
Sure. I mean, I guess one of the beauties of a character that it's not true to say that nobody cares about because, as is so often the case with a character that has fewer fans, the remaining fans are like uber fans. It's like a hole in a dam, a really big hole. The water comes out kind of sluggish, but a tiny little hole, that water shoots out like a dynamo. So it is with fandoms. If there's a very small number of fans, they will be the biggest fucking fans in the world. And so when you take on a project like Black Knight, there's probably a sort of overwhelming indifference, and you have to prove to people that it's a story worth telling, except for the 3 people who are the biggest Black Knight fans in the universe, who will be emailing you within 30 seconds of the announcement. Luckily, they're all really lovely and we're very supportive and generally not too not too upset, because there's no point taking a character like that who has been hugely popular or more popular in the past than they are now. There's no point taking that character if all you're going to do is the same. Again, you have to find a way to say something new, to attempt to
bring in a new fan base.
Sure, and I mean, ideally, it's not so cynical. It's not a case of we must hit the following quadrants and present the following things. It's more about what's a take on this character which is respectful, which loves the things that have gone before, but also opens up a new
category. Like, what can we do to add to their mythos? Drawing in like a new fan base to this character, but also giving a nice little nod to people that have previously read the character.
And the answer, I think, was, well, it was a multiple answer. The Arthurian mythos of it all was sort of there and waiting to be mined. It's kind of cool to take a mythology that everybody is at least slightly familiar with, Merlin and Arthur and the Sword from the Stone and all that stuff, and then to be able to say, okay, now here's a side of it you don't know. Here's what it was really like. Here's what was going on in the shadows on the sidelines. So that's fun. So we sort of presented this secret history of Camelot. We presented Camelot as the Marvel Universe's first kind of modern day Manhattan, a place where superhumans would have congregated from all over the world.
Right. And a lot of times, even in like even when you do research medieval history, the amount of a lot of their futuristic concepts are like way ahead of their time. Like they had it down pat. Like they had a very great government. They had a great education system for those who it applied to. Obviously, it didn't apply to everybody because you had people who were not in that social class, but they were really advanced.
What's fascinating about Arthurian history in inverted commas is that it doesn't make any sense. Like there is no real time or place in history where those things happen. They can't. The contradictory, the technology isn't right, the linealogy of the kings and queens isn't right. So what we came up with for the Black Knight was this idea that Camelot is a sort of city-sized TARDIS, if you're familiar with the sort of Doctor Who TARDIS, in the sense that it exists in multiple time frames, it moves around, it's sort of constantly shifting its location. So it's just this really cool conceit that explains why Arthurian history makes no fucking sense and yet still can be a cool part of the story. And then we tell a secondary parallel story in the present, which is all about Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, finally realizing what his whole deal is. Like his whole thing is that he's always been associated, entangled, frankly, with the ebony blade, the sword, which is his sort of signature weapon. And it's over the years, it's been cursed, or it's been a manifestation of his own curse or whatever. And we kind of drilled down and just distilled that a little bit to the extent that what we've said is the ebony blade, it's kind of like the anti-Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. Thor's hammer will only work for somebody who's worthy. The ebony blade will only work for somebody who's fucking angry and broken and depressed and miserable. The more tormented you are, the more powerful it becomes. And so, to cut a very long story short, which involves Mordred trying to control the entire world through a self-help app, what we've ended up with is Dane Whitman discovering that he has a young daughter that he never knew about. She's called Jax Chopra. And because being the Black Knight is such a
consuming role.
Yeah, and something that you're going to be doomed, unless you... So what they decided is something that I've never seen in superhero fiction before, which is that you have one hero with two people in the role. So they share the role, basically. There's father and daughter. They put on this uniform. They put on the helmet. You can't tell which one it is because it doesn't matter. It's the Black Knight. Nobody cares who's inside the helmet, which I think is a really cool conceit. This idea that you can have a brand, an icon, an identity which is greater than the human identity of whoever's inside it. And it comes with lots of juice about familial relationships, responsibility, anger, all these things, which eventually we sort of started to explore a little bit in the Doctor Strange event, the Xmen tie-in.
Right. Which kind of leads me to my next question. It came up in the chat, but I was going to ask anyway. Was this like anywhere tethered to Dane Whitman making his appearance in the MCU?
I think, I mean, presumably, yeah. Presumably somebody 6 months before that was ever a thing got on the radar inside Marvel HQ that there was going to be some Dane Whitman action, and they were like, well, we should do a series about that. Who should we ask to do that? And they thought of me, lunatics. But the diktats were few and far between. There was certainly no sort of intel about what to expect from the movie at that point. So nobody was saying to me, oh, he must do this, he must be this, right. Which is refreshing. And we did some weird shit with the character, you know, like we've established that if the Black Knight dies while he's holding the sword in his hands, it will bring him back to life, whether he likes it or not. Which is the sort of thing that could run quite contrary to whatever's going on in the cinematic universe, but they let us do it, which is kind of brave and fun. So yeah.
Right. What do we have left in store? Like, do you have any further work coming out with Black Knight? Is Jack's story over? Are you going to continue that project?
I can't. Well, the short answer is I can't answer that without spoilers, which goes some way to answer your question. You know, things are happening, but I can't talk about what.
Perfect. So I guess we can't really talk about who else is going to appear in there, can we, other than Black Knight and Jax. But I'm great. I'm excited because Jose Davia killed it on art. And that was like, I always like books that make you think, kind of like question life. The whole thing between the Ebony Blade and Black Knight, kind of having that toxic relationship. Sometimes we need that in a way. Like, I think sometimes as humans, we kind of crave some toxic energy, or we want someone to at least share that with. And for that to be his daughter, to me, that was like really compelling. Like, as a father, you have an unknown daughter. Is that something you would want to put on her, or is that like necessary for the grand scheme of things?
Well, I think it was important for that. On that point, it was very important that it be her choice.
Right.
He, like any decent father, would not want his daughter to stride into that role, but she, being as troubled as him for a whole host of different reasons, has the agency and empathy to say, no, I want to do this. I want to help you, and not just help you, but also to sort of discover who I am, to stand up and claim my own slice of agency and power. So I think it's, given that it's ultimately, like, you know, subtext alarm, it's a story about two people who are depressives and dealing with anger issues and just broken in all sorts of ways. It's about them discovering that if they stand back to back, then they can hold each other up. And that's kind of a wonderful moral of the story. If you're dealing with the realpolitik of superheroes, which is ultimately a little bit unhealthy when you look at it. These are sort of moral arbiters and role models whose basic job is to hit shit. You know, there's no version of that which is a healthy thing unless it's speaking to finding inner strength, supporting yourself, doing something which builds and constructs as well as simply destroys. And that's why the Black Knight is such a compelling character, because you can talk and discuss around all of these things.
100%. And another great question from the chat. When are we getting a solo Dr. Nemesis?
Tomorrow, if I had my way.
Tomorrow, if you had your way. That's a book that I still need to check out. What's up, Big Herm? Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is Whiplash Wednesday with the PCP Army Bad Batch. So look for us to drop content all throughout today. This is a great way to start off our morning as well. So let's switch gears to the Xmen, because you've kind of brought in a lot of religion to the Xmen. Was that like your idea, or was that kind of part of Hickman's world? How did you get started in the whole Krakoa age?
It was kind of the brief. Let's see. I bumped into Jerry at a convention a few years ago, and he said that my name had come up in their discussions about, because all those years ago I did X-Men Legacy, which went down extremely well. It's a book that means a lot to me, and I think that sort of shows in the writing. And they wanted they wanted me to come and join the room to see if I could find something that spoke to theme and to the sort of big metaphors that you can muck about with in X-Men comics in the same way. Now, in X-Men, I want to say 7. Somebody else can correct me because I'm very bad at the memory of exactly what issue things happen in. But let's go with 7 for now. Hickman did a whole story in which the concept of crucible is introduced, which is the sort of pseudo-suicidal, gladiatorial, cultural upbloom, which Apocalypse initiated to allow depowered mutants to die with honor. Fascinating concept. Not something that is right or wrong for everybody, but something you can pick apart and think about and come to your own conclusions about. But in the same issue, the anvil against which that hammer was struck was Nightcrawler's sense of uncertainty, his moral confusion and anxieties to do with the way that Krakoa was going. And that issue ends with him saying, I think I need to create a mutant religion. So when Jordan White came to me and said, hey, what pictures have you got? And by the way, if one of them was about a mutant religion, that would be nice. That was what kind of triggered that whole train of thought. Way of X grew from there. And it was immediately obvious that if I treated it crudely as a book in which Nightcrawler just creates a mutant religion, then it was going to be lazy and disappointing and offensive to an awful lot of people.
Right.
So instead, it was incumbent upon me to find a solution whereby whatever he comes up with, it's earned, which means you have to spend a good bunch of time with him asking the big questions and trying to find the right answers.
Right. And
the solution, when it eventually arrives, has to be something which allows existing faiths to continue to exist. So Nightcrawler, for instance, self-defines as a Roman Catholic, so he continues to be a Catholic. Any other mutant around him who is of faith or indeed of no faith can continue to express themselves in those terms, but they can involve themselves with his solution. His solution is a thing called the spark, and it's like a completely made up philosophy, which only works if you live in a society where dying is not the end of your life, which of course is the big story in mutant kind at the moment. They can all be resurrected at any moment. Right. If that's true for you, then it makes sense to live your life as if every day is your last, to try new things, to embrace new modes of thought, to do the shit that you've never done before. And that is true of culture, art, love, sex, and fighting. Like, you know, just to reduce it down to the standard Marvel-y, let's have a punch-up stuff. If you can be resurrected, then the way that you would approach a battle is not the same as the way you would approach a battle if you had to be very careful because you're just a fragile meat sack that could be destroyed at any moment. So this whole philosophy of the spark, it's about helping mutants who live in this remarkable paradise to feel valuable, to have a kind of cultural identity which would otherwise not be there. Like this comes up again and again in speculative fiction. If you put a bunch of people into a paradise where they've got everything they could possibly need, it goes wrong really quickly because people aren't very good at being happy. We get antsy and bored and we feel meaningless and we start looking for trouble and we get into fights and it's a mess. So Nightcrawler's bang on the money. Religion is one of the things that makes people feel valuable. But his solution had to be something that applies only to mutants and did not contradict any existing religion. And that's the spark. So that's where we ended in Way of X with this kind of sweet, fictional. And by the way, he's not pretending that there is some magical being called the spark. This is entirely an abstraction. This is going to get a bit pretentious, but I happen to believe it is more impressive that a story can change a person's mind and the way they live their life that they know is a fiction than a story that can do so that is pretending to be a fact. So for me, if I'm Nightcrawler and I go around saying, listen, guys, there's no such thing as the spark, but if we all pretend there is, life gets really cool. That's wonderful. That's a world I would like to live in. Anyway, that's all very highfalutin and doesn't really speak to the nitty-gritty X-Men of it all. We ended Way of X with everybody coming together in this kind of psychic dreamlike trance inside the head of David Haller, Legion, to defeat Onslaught, because Onslaught was back, by the way. And
because we're dealing with that too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, there was a lot going on in that book. And we ended that book with Nightcrawler realizing that when you have a population of superhumans who, let's be clear, are quite famed for being a bit dramatic and throwing tantrums, any one of whom could literally headbutt their hole through the planet, you need a way of keeping them in order. And it's not about breaking heads and dragging people off to jail. It's about making sure that explosions don't happen. And that's what we're dealing with now in Legion of X.
Right. So you've worked with Doug Haller before. What is kind of your approach to that character? The way, because
David Haller.
David Haller, sorry. I'm thinking of Doug Cypher. What is your approach with him, and why did you feel the need to bring him back? Because you've previously worked on him before.
Yeah, so I mentioned X-Men Legacy before. There's a slightly wanky answer to this question. And this comes about as a result of getting old and having kids and constantly reassessing my life. When I am on my deathbed, this got dark, sorry. When I'm on my deathbed, the things that I look back on and wonder whether I was any good at my job, at my life, they won't be of the form, did you write a forgettable run on Batman? Did you write Thor? I would love to do both of those things, by the way, but those aren't the things that are going to stick in my conscience on my deathbed. It will be, did you believe everything you wrote? Did you change anybody's life for the better? Did you change your own life for the better? And I say all of this wanky, pretentious preamble to say that X-Men Legacy, which was a 24-issue series about a boy with a ridiculous haircut, which I didn't ever expect to be a defining piece of work in my career, has been the book that has changed my life, sure, but also I can't now go to a convention without somebody at some point coming up to me and saying, dude, I read that book and it gave me the strength to go on. And the answer, by the way, is I did not give you the strength to go on. You found the strength to go on. And I'm touched and honored that something I wrote might have helped. X-Men Legacy was about taking the mutant metaphor, which has been used very successfully in the past to speak about race and gender and sexuality and all sorts of wonderful things that are important to talk about, and repurposing it to speak about mental health, to speak about the fact that if your own worst enemy is your brain, then what are you going to do with that? And the rubric that Legion, David Haller, came to repeat again and again was just the phrase, I rule me. It's this idea that if you can't be fixed, you can't be cured, then you simply have to own it. You have to take responsibility for yourself and manage it. And that's enough.
Right.
And that's the best that any of us can truly hope for. Anyway, that series ended in a really bittersweet way, which I kind of feel was the only way it could have ended. And spoilers, it ends with Legion essentially writing himself out of the Marvel Universe. And I knew, because I'm mischievous, that I was making it difficult for anybody to follow me, because that was my character at that point. And if anybody else was going to write them, they were going to have to work hard for it. Marvel being Marvel, it really wasn't very long before Legion just popped back up again without...
Oh, really... yeah, we're like Age of X-Men. I was like, what?
So
came back and
that's that's par for the course. What it means is that when I come back to it now in the Krakoan era, I don't have to explain too hard how David came back. And I can sort of pick up where I left off with a slightly older and more mature David who knows who he is, knows all about his own flaws, knows all the things that he learned during my run, but now has to deal with the reality of a population that he can help. It's
but
no longer
he's not as accepted in it.
Exactly, and it's increasingly it's about he's literally and canonically one of, if not the most powerful mutant in the world. So what's he going to do when he finds that he could be instrumental in changing the direction of the entire mutant race? Does he just take a back seat, enjoy paradise, sip a cocktail, let his dad do all the hard work?
Well, he's not really as friendly with his dad, so he's like, he kind of wants to prove him wrong a little bit. He kind of has like a...
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Professor X is either the best thing or the worst thing that ever happened to mutant kind, and he's definitely a really shitty dad. So there's a lot of that to explore. There's a lot of questions that Legion has to face about does he intend to take a shot at being a leader? And if he does intend to try and lead in some role, is the Quiet Council big enough for him and his dad, or does one of them have to go? So yeah, there's a lot of that coming down the pipe.
That's awesome. One of the things that I enjoyed the most about Legion is the fact that he is kind of that guy on the outside. Like, he's a very caring person, but he also knows the way that other people perceive him. Right. So he's like, I can't rewrite anything that has previously happened. All I can focus on is how you perceive me in the future. And like you said, that age gap between your last time writing him and now in the Krakoan age really shows how he's kind of matured. It's almost kind of like Anakin Skywalker in like the third movie, right? He like kind of knows I'm not going to switch anyone's heads. But instead of like, I mean, the only difference is one killed younglings, the other helped create a mutant religion. Same thing really. If you really want to break it down, it's not much different. But I do like this question. When will you be writing Marrow and Phantom X? I know Marrow is kind of doing her own thing with the Secret X-Men, but are we going to see you do Phantom X again? Because that'd be dope.
I have no plans, is the short answer. Phantom X, I know there's conversations about Phantom X always. I don't know where they've landed. Marrow, she appeared in Teeny's book, didn't she?
Recently.
And there was, it's funny, was she in one of the drafts and the X-Men votes that we started doing? I feel like she was in one of those. And it's funny, Marrow's one of those characters. There's a few of them. There's like Marrow and Maggot and Chamber. These characters who, when they actually appear in books, the vast majority of readers and fans, i.e. the people who don't join fan groups and don't come on the internet to talk about it, they're like, yeah. But for some reason, those characters are beloved by the writers, the artists, and the sort of the top tier of fandom, the ones who are really noisy,
right,
seem to really go for those characters. So it's always really tempting to believe. Like, I have this stupid rule. It's Spurrier's first law of the internet, which is factions speak louder than herds. It's always tempting to believe that the factions who are shouting about Marrow or Maggot or whoever it is are like, yeah, they're completely true, and I can trust them that if I put this character in my book, it's going to sell like gangbusters. Right. In truth, that is not how it goes, unfortunately.
It depends on how you use them, right? And I've kind of noticed, like, okay, so I just picked up a hardcover, like a week ago, and I turned to like the first page and I see like Pixie playing baseball. And I'm like, this is part of Brubaker's Manifest Destiny. And I'm just like, I love this already. And I haven't even read it past the first page. I'm like, just seeing Pixie playing baseball is just the coolest thing in the world for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Pixie's another one. I think Pixie should be A-list, and I will keep writing her as long as I'm allowed to. But she's one of those characters that everybody who gets excited will get excited by, but the vast majority who probably
Mike Carey Brubaker also wrote some of it. It was like who's in it? It was like a lot of people. It was like, I think this issue was Brubaker, and Carey did some of the others, and so did Yost. Oh wait, no, that is Pixies and Demons is Mike Carey. My bad, I misspoke.
You're being fact checked.
You know what? You know, I love when people fact check me, because that then I know people are paying attention to what I say. So if I say something shitty, someone. But I love seeing like kind of niche X-Men, and especially in the Krakoan age. I never question you, and he's one of my best friends out here. He's always on the channel, but I always love seeing when niche X-Men care, especially like in the Krakoan age, because that's like where we would want to see them now more than ever. And I think now's the best time, because you're introducing a lot of people to the X-Men. We're giving people a great place to start. And Pixie is a great character. You know, she's kind of newer. Same thing with like that's why like I love seeing Kid Omega in X-Force, is because this is kind of still a newer character on a lot of people's minds that is so powerful but so misconceived at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, hey, conflicted and contradictory characters are always going to be better for stories. It's funny, one of the real joys of Legion of X, the new book, is that there's not a kind of a team, a roster, a core roster in the traditional sense. Like we've become quite accustomed to imagining these X books as being kind of paramilitary teams who get together and go out and do stuff. Whereas with Way of X, it was really just sort of Nightcrawler and a couple of others wandering around and talking to whoever was there at the time. And in Legion of X, it's more like there's this group of volunteers, and there's probably, I mean, I don't know how many of them there are, 50, 20, I don't know. And we kind of focus on 4 or 5 of them, but we have this wonderful privilege of just being able to fill backgrounds with characters that just never get any screen time. And every now and then they'll come and do something cool because they need to be there for that.
Yeah, moment. like Fabian Cortez coming in just
sure
resurrect.
And then exactly. Like, and I mean, Cortez is a really funny one. Al did such great work with him in Sword that we were able to kind of do a handover. Right. And everyone loves a weasel, right? A weasel who falls from grace and then has the slightest chance of redemption. That's a great character.
And it just doesn't work because Magneto said no. So
yeah.
So basically, what I've gathered from the past like 15 minutes of talking about X-Men is you're probably the biggest Grant Morrison fan when it comes to their new X-Men.
I mean, it's amazing stuff, isn't it?
It is. It's great. It was actually this guy here who put me on to that run. I had it like stored up for my OCS. I picked it up and I was like, you know what? Let me finally read it. It's like one of my favorite stories of all time now.
Sure. It's cracking. I go back and read it maybe once a year. I don't know. It's really funny. I mean, my memory's appalling anyway, but it's one of those stories that it's so widescreen and so kind of conceptually mind-changing, and I don't mean that in the sort of psychedelic sense. I mean that in the sense that it's such a bold new take on.
But it focuses where like it needs to. It's like here's the broad horizon, but let's zoom in.
I mean that's Grant's genius, isn't it? They're so good at focusing on the familiar but different. But at the same time, I struggle to remember some of the big kind of actiony threat stuff in those books. I remember character moments far more than I remember the big plotty stuff, right. Which is again something that they are very, very good at. It's a lesson that I've kind of taken to heart writing X-Men myself, because I'm always going to be a plotty writer. I love throwing stuff into books and creating mysteries and having things popping up and triggering other things.
Well, I say you do that with a lot of your books too. Like in Black and White, there was like a lot of aspects. I'm like, well, that's something to think about right there. You know, and I think as a writer, if you can make somebody think like kind of outside the box, you've done your job, right?
Sure.
If you read a comic book in 5 minutes, 6 minutes, you didn't do your job as a writer.
Well, isn't that funny? I mean, it's not something that as creators we're supposed to think about, but value for money is actually a really important thing. If you're spending $5 or $4 on a comic and it takes you 30 seconds to read because it's it's 20 pages of 3 panels of people punching each other, then that ain't a good investment of your money. But if it's takes a little longer and then you want to read it again and it makes you think and you come back to it again and again, that to me is what I want out of my comics. Now, there has to be a happy medium. That's not always what we want from our superhero comics, but I feel like there's probably a nice medium between those.
Right. And that's why I'm such a big fan of your work. 'Cause I think of all like the X-Men writers out there, I'm like, I think I've thought the most about my own personal life reading Way of X than I did any other book. And I was like, and I've talked to a lot of British creators, though, a lot of people overseas. You guys have such a great, unique way of thinking about the big two, right? Because I think that goes to like a lot of the Vertigo writers, right? A lot of like Hellblazer concepts. It's almost like a lot of them have crossed over now into like mainstream media. Like we have Ram V, Al Ewing, Dan Watters, like Garth Ennis, his Batman Reptilian. I stand by this was the best Batman book when it was coming out.
Good,
right? Because I was like, that's just like it's such a not really like psychedelic. It like has a great balance between psychedelicness, but it's like you think about it, like you put it down. It's like you just think about everything that happened and where it applies, and it's like, okay, it reminds me of this, it reminds me of that. And that's where like characters like Nightcrawler come into play. Someone who's always kind of questioned himself for years, ever since he first appeared. Ever since Claremont, Cockrum, and Byrne did their work on him. He's always kind of been. He's never really the fastest person. With his abilities, he very well could be the fastest person to the answer. He can be the fastest person to save whoever needs to be saved. Sure. But Nightcrawler is always taking the time to think about everyone else and how will his decision affect everyone. Right.
That's actually very astute. Funnily enough, I was just writing a scene before I came on here, where we're sort of slowly building to with one of the many threads in Legion of X, is the idea that Nightcrawler has spent his whole life trying to fill up the people around him with wonder and value and meaning and faith and happiness and health and wonder and all these things, but probably has never stopped to actually worry about himself. And right. that's kind of where we're coming to. There's a character that gets introduced in issue 1. She's an Iraqi, I have to say, not an Iraqi. It sounds very similar.
Iraqi with an A. Yeah. Iraqi. ARAKKI, something like that. Iraqi.
Yeah, I think so. I have to do a spell check on that every time. A woman from Araco, let's put it that way, who Araco being the kind of what was formerly Mars, which is now a vast terraformed colony of
the X-Men.
Sort of warlike mutants from another dimension who got stuck in time. It's where Apocalypse first came from, and anyway, long story, but they're very cool and very interesting. And Al's book X-Men Red will be focusing in on them mostly. But she's called Weaponless Zen. She comes to Krakoa as a sort of buddy movie cop vibe with Nightcrawler to find a fugitive from Araco. And it's beautiful because they're such extremes. She's all about duty and the law and serving her oath and all these very straightforward, simple things. But she's also quite horny for Nightcrawler specifically. So there's lots of kind of fun times there to be had. And in their sort of orbit around one another, they start to learn a great deal about themselves, which is just perfect story stuff. So yeah, that's really fun to write.
I'm really excited. So what is the official pitch? Because I never asked you, what is the official pitch for Legion of X? Why should we buy this book? Why should people care to buy yet? Put another X-Men book on their pool. There are 20 X-Men books. Why is this one? Why should they read it?
I mean, I kind of touched on it earlier on. It's for the first time in the history of the Marvel Universe, we have a densely populated populace of superhumans. Getting drunk, flirting, fucking, getting in fights, being teenagery and tantrumy and generally surly. And when you have that many overpowered people in a very small space, things can and do go wrong very, very quickly. And so you need somebody or some people to keep the peace. And so Legion of X is about what it means to keep the peace. And it's basically a precinct story. It's NYPD Blue, except on Krakoa. And yet, these people are very clear that they are not conventional cops. They're not in the business of showing up, beating you over the head and dragging you off to jail. They are in the business of thinking differently, preventing disaster, finding the missing, whether it's missing people or missing solutions or missing emotions, and just generally being awesome. And there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of really cool world building, and it all takes place, the precinct part of it, in a swirling psychedelic island on the astral plane, which is a bubble universe inside David Haller's brain called the Altar, where anything goes. And it's like an MC Escher painting with stairs leading in every direction. And in the middle of it all is a Wild West sheriff's office where Nightcrawler holds court. So it's just wildly creative fun with the idea of how do we stop this community from going kaboom?
That's awesome. That's I'm sold. And everyone in the chat right now is like, we're good. We got the 3 L's. That's all I needed. Should have started with that. Before we get into Step by Bloody Step, I did get a great question from Steph, Missing Link. What characters are you interested in writing that you have not taken a shot at yet, Big Two wise?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. It's one of those ones that I could probably just waffle for hours about. Let's see. I'd love to do some Doctor Strange. I think I could do a absolutely bonkers psychedelic Strange story.
Do it, bro. Do it.
I'd love to. There's opportunities are not always available, sadly. But Moon Knight, I feel like I could do some Moon Knight, although that's about to be hot property for obvious reasons.
Well, I mean, I guess you need to go fight Jed McKay because he's writing both those books.
Both of those things. I mean, goddamn, that guy. He's very good. So
he was just on the show like 3 weeks ago too.
I saw. He's lovely. I love Jed to bits, but yeah, he's a lucky fucker. I get drawn to the weird characters, which is a bad strategy. Like there's a DC character called oh god, I have to look him up now. Hang on.
I did say I remember like talking with people. I was like, Sai would have a lot to say about Doctor Strange. I'm like, this is a character that I think needs like a true fan. And I was just like, I think Sai has like the weirdness to him that is like not like bad weird. I was like, this guy should be weird enough to write Doctor Strange.
Put together a pitch long ago with Christian Ward
for
Doctor Strange stuck in the Savage Land, which I think would be absolutely fun.
That would be great. You need to write Savage Avengers because you can put in Doctor Strange. David Pepos is writing it, but I'm sure I'm sure you can. You can write Conan. You can write Conan. You can write Brother Voodoo. You can write Doctor Strange and Conan. Like whoa.
No, the possibilities are endless. Mobius is the character I was thinking of from DC. This crazy guy who flies around in a chair. And he's like a sort of immoral Doctor Who analog who can see
the part where Batman sat on the Mobius chair and saw 3 Jokers and went against everything Grant Morrison said.
Sure, but imagine a sort of traveling through time and space secret history of the DCU where it's just Doctor Who with this cackling immoral asshole flying around.
I think you need to write their continuity because that's like the perfect way for them to fix it right now. But I'm gonna leave my frustration with that for another video that we've spoken about many times. I know you said you had a hard cutoff at 1, so I do want to give you the space to talk about Step by Bloody Step.
Sure.
What's the pitch, man?
You must excuse me. As I was telling Brandon before I started, I'm coming off a bad dose of the COVID, so I'm still a little bit chesty.
Doom Patrol would be great too.
I'd like to see Simon on Doom Patrol. That would be very cool. Step by Bloody Step. It's so I guess the team guff. So it's by Matthias Bergara and myself. Same team who did Coda, which is a book we did for Boom a few years ago, which is a sort of deconstructivist fantasy about. Coda is to Lord of the Rings as Mad Max is to our world. Okay, so it's a world where magic and fantasy were once high fantasy, and then it all went wrong, and all the magic is gone. What do you do when the magic is gone? That's what Coda is about. And everywhere that we've taken Coda, it's gone through all the countries of Europe and all over other territories around the world. It's picked up nominations and awards, and we could not be more proud of that book. So we knew that when we came to do a new book together, me and Matthias, it had to be even more ambitious and even more beautiful and strange, because Matthias is a world-class artist in waiting. So we came up with Step by Bloody Step, and it's the story of a little girl who wakes up freezing cold in the blizzard, and she has nothing. She has no memories. She has no name. She has no language. All she's got is a giant, a fucking enormous armored giant who carries her before she learns to walk, and then protects her and guards her every step thereafter. And they together walk across this utterly amazing, spectacular fantasy world. And they have to walk in a straight line always, because if they stop or deviate or try to turn back, the world itself comes alive and tries to force them onwards. So they don't know where they're going. They don't know who they are. They don't know what this journey is all about. And most importantly, they can't ask, because Step by Bloody Step is a completely text-free comic. It's like 160 pages of the most astonishingly beautiful fantasy you have ever seen without a single word spoken. And it's always a worry that people are going to think, oh, pretentious experimental art house fare. And it's not that. It's dripping with plot and emotion and intrigue and mystery. And we simply learned to do it visually. And we wanted to prove that comics, as we all secretly know, are the most miraculous, magical medium. And it's like, the analogy I will use is when you listen to a choir singing, it's uplifting, it's beautiful, you love this sound. If you tell the loudest person in the choir to shut up, then you start to hear the nuance and the sweetness of all the quieter voices. And you realize why you love music in the first place. And that's what we're doing with Step by Bloody Step. We're taking away the words so that we all go, oh, comics are so cool. And it works. It works really, really well.
I'm like, I read the first issue and I was like, yo, this needs to be in my hand. Because I was reading it on my iPad. I'm like, it's great. I'm like, this is great, but I need the full experience with it in my hand.
I just got the comps yesterday and they are really beautiful. Absolutely stunning work.
Do you want me to spotlight you if you want to show off some of the pages?
Oh, dude. My camera's not great, but
oh wait, let's switch that. Let's drag you over here. Boom.
And then, I mean, hell, look. We begin with, I can't even see now. Young giant's hand. So what we learned, I mean, just to waffle on this a bit, Matthias quickly learned that when you don't have to leave space for text, you can break down the action into all sorts of exciting techniques that we just don't have access to. And the way that the reader's eye moves across the page is quite interesting. You would think that a comic with no text would be much quicker to read. But actually what happens in practice is you realize when people are reading an ordinary comic, their eye jumps straight away to the balloon, reads the text, spends a couple of seconds either confirming or juxtaposing what they've just learned in the text with the image around it, and then jumps onwards. When there is no text, every panel has to be investigated. The eye has to be absorbed into it. And the effect is, as I say, absorptive. It's quite intense. And we realized quite early on that when you're having to work that hard unconsciously to read the thing, you have to build in like moments of deep beauty and silence just to give the reader's eye a chance to go, ah.
That looked so much better on the page.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's just wonderful. And it's a book that I could never have made without an artist like Matthias and without a colorist like Mateus Lopez. Together, they're just teaching me that, I mean, it is no great surprise to anybody who reads me to know that I'm quite a wordy writer. I love voices. I love hearing accents. My scripts are very long. And so it was a real challenge having to tell a story without recourse to any dialogue at all. And it works. It works because I happen to be working with two masterminds, and my God, it's like a revelation. Comics are so clever
Right. And as a writer, you know, that takes like a lot of trust in your team, right? To kind of silence yourself. It's like if you're the star player, sometimes you got to pass the ball to somebody else, right? Let
Yes,
other people get
it's
the
spotlight.
spotlight, you know.
Yeah,
Which is
exactly.
great. We don't get, and I'm gonna say this about we were talking about New X-Men earlier, that silent issue in there. Which was so powerful to that story. You know, even the Batman and Robin series that Tomasi and Gleason did with the Requiem for Damian, you know. There's a silent issue in Tom King's Batman that Lee Weeks drew. What else? Where else do we have silent issues? We had a silent issue of Nightwing not too long ago that Bruno Redondo did.
It can work really well. I mean, it is as simple as if the artist is a genius, it works.
Right,
and it can
a
also
lot of
go really badly wrong if you're
and a
not
lot
working.
of those comics to like a true comic book fan or to even other artists, other writers, those mean the most, like in the grand scheme of things. So like you could remember the whole run, but you're gonna focus on that one issue, and it's gonna be like that silent issue. It's gonna be that change of pace.
Yeah. It's
something
anything that feels a little bit different. Yeah, it's really remarkable, and it's. I mean, amongst other things, one of the unique things about it is because there is no language barrier. It means that we can co-publish it in the US and in Europe at the same time. So it's a co-publication between Image and Dupuis, which is one of the biggest bande dessinée publishers in Europe. So we're kind of breaking a lot of barriers. We're doing some really interesting things. We realized, as I said, it's quite an intense read. We realized that around 2/3 of the way through, readers are starting to feel like something is missing. And our characters, not to get too spoilery, they stop. The obstacles that stand before them cease to be monsters. There's still a lot of monsters, but it's not just monsters. They start to encounter people. They start to encounter civilization. The challenges they face become more complex, more seductive, more civilized. And we realize that when we start getting into those phases, it's not enough to just have silence. We have to show that the people they encounter are communicating with one another in a way that we can't understand. So I'm just looking for a page that illustrates this. We started using, I don't know if you can see that. We started using, where's it gone? There it is. We started using like my focus on this camera is terrible. Like an artificial language, hieroglyphs. And you'd be amazed at the way that the reader's eye, again, it sort of goes, I understand this now. I can relax. I know what's happening. I don't need to understand it. It's already been proved to me over the previous 30 pages that I don't need these words to understand the story. But now I know people are talking. I know that things are about to get more complicated. And you can use all these tools that you never realized you had as a creator. It's really fun.
Right on, man. That's really amazing. I'm really excited to pick this up. It's out next week. The 23rd.
23rd. If that's next week, then that's probably about right.
That's next week, everyone. So make sure you contact your LCS, get it on hold so you can pick up a copy yourself. I'm going to be doing the same when I go there right after this interview. Yeah. So whenever we have an X-Men writer on, we always ask them, who is your favorite X-Men character? So before you depart, we got to ask that.
It's not fair to ask me that question.
It's all right. There is a correct answer.
There's too many. Chamber? I know that's stupid. I don't know why. I love Chamber. I think like you could do he speaks to the John Constantine in me a little bit, and the sort of tragic grotesquerie of a character who can never really touch and relate to people. That speaks to something in me. He's powerful. He's great in a fight, but he's also just sort of tormented and a bit doomed and a bit mopey. I would love to. If Chamber was a bigger character, then he would be in every single book I write. As it is, I occasionally manage to sneak him in.
As long as you didn't say Cyclops, you were good in my book.
His place.
He has his place, but Havoc is the better brother. So I thank you so much for being here today, man. I really appreciated it. This was a great conversation. You're welcome back anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a real joy.
100%, you guys. Stay tuned for the Bad Batch to be dropping content all day today. I believe we have Travis dropping next at 3 o'clock. That's going to be premiering, chatting with the comic community. Then we have later today around 8 o'clock, 8:30, whenever we start that show. We got Big Her, Missing Link, and Fable 1 collection down. I'm going to be talking Battlestar Galactica tonight. It's going to be a great time, you guys. Stay tuned for this today. Take care, you guys. Make sure you guys give it a thumbs up on your way out. Thank you guys so much. Take care, everybody.
Take it easy.